Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little grittier. The muddy, torchlit world of medieval Paris, a city of towering cathedrals, ambitious kings, and bone-crushing poverty. This wasn't the Paris of romantic cobblestones or cafe culture. This was the Paris of open sewers, plague, and the ever-present stench of death. A place where surviving until your 30th birthday was considered a remarkable achievement. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, and the first thing you notice is the rat. It's sitting on your chest, bold as brass, whiskers twitching as it considers whether you're alive enough to be dangerous. Welcome to your home. It's not a house, it's not even really a room. It's a space, carved out between other spaces, in a building that groans and sways like a dying tree. You share this cramped corner with your entire family. 7 people, 2 chickens, and a pig that serves as both garbage disposal and future dinner. The walls are made of wattle and daub, basically sticks and mud mixed with animal hair and dung. They're cracking, letting in the cold Parisian wind that carries the smell of the Seine, which is less river and more open sewer. There's no window, just a hole covered with oiled parchment that lets in a sickly yellow light. The floor is packed earth, worn smooth by generations of bare feet and covered with rushes that haven't been changed since your grandfather was young. Something lives in those rushes. You can hear it scurrying at night. Your bed is a straw mattress that you share with 2 siblings. The straw is ancient, moldy, and home to an entire ecosystem of fleas, lice, and things you've decided not to think about. Your pillow is a sack filled with whatever soft material could be found. Feathers, if you're lucky. More straw if you're not. There's no plumbing. The garderobe, if you can call it that, is a shared pit in the courtyard. It's emptied when it overflows, which is more often than you'd like, and less often than it should be. The smell permeates everything, clinging to your clothes, your hair, your very soul. You've learned to sleep lightly because fire is always a threat. Candles tip over, hearths spark, and when one building catches, half the neighborhood goes with it. There's no fire department, just neighbors with buckets and prayers. But somehow, this cramped, smelly, dangerous space is home. You know which floorboard creaks, which wall drips when it rains, and exactly how to position yourself to avoid the worst of the drafts. You know the rhythm of your family's breathing, the sound of the neighbor's cough, and the particular way the building settles in the pre-dawn hours. This is where your day begins. In medieval Paris, where survival starts before you even open your eyes. You stumble outside, still rubbing sleep from your eyes, and immediately understand why so many people die young. The air in medieval Paris isn't just bad, it's aggressively hostile to human life. It's a thick soup of smoke, filth, and decay that seems to grab you by the throat and refuse to let go. The smell hits you first. It's a complex bouquet of unwashed bodies, rotting food, animal waste, and something indefinably wrong that seems to rise from the very stones of the street. There are no sewers, just open ditches running down the middle. of each road, carrying a brown sludge that defies description. When it rains, this delightful mixture overflows onto the walkways, such as they are. The air is thick with smoke from countless fires. Every building has a hearth, every workshop has a forge, and every baker has an oven. All of this burns wood, and all of that smoke has nowhere to go except into your lungs. Children wheeze like old men. Old men simply don't exist in great numbers. Then there's the industrial pollution. Paris is a working city, full of tanners turning animal hides into leather, using urine and dung. Smiths heating metal in roaring forges, and butchers processing meat in conditions that would horrify a modern health inspector. Each trade adds its own special note to the symphony of stench. The streets themselves are narrow, barely wide enough for two people to pass. Buildings lean out over the roads, blocking what little light might filter down from the sky. In the summer, the heat bakes the filth into a concentrated essence of misery. In winter, everything freezes into sharp, dangerous chunks that can cut your feet through worn shoe leather. And let's not forget the wonderful Parisian tradition of simply throwing waste out the window. Chamber pots are emptied from second and third-story windows, with a casual garde low. Watch out for the water. Except it's not water, and sometimes people don't bother with the warning. The air doesn't just smell bad, it tastes bad. You can feel it coating the inside of your mouth, settling in your teeth. Every breath is a conscious act of survival, a reminder that in medieval Paris, even the air is trying to kill you. But somehow, people adapt. You learn to breathe through your mouth in certain areas, to recognize the wind patterns that might bring a moment of relief, and to accept that this is simply what air tastes like when you live in one of the largest cities in the medieval world. Your stomach growls, a sharp reminder that you haven't eaten since yesterday's single meal. Time for breakfast, which in medieval Paris is less a meal and more a desperate negotiation with hunger. If you're lucky enough to have work, and luckier still to have been paid recently, you might have a few deniers in your pouch. If not, well, there are other ways to fill your belly. The bread is the foundation of any medieval meal, but don't expect the soft, white loaves of modern bakeries. The bread available to the poor is dark, dense, and often mixed with sawdust, ground peas, or whatever else the baker can find to stretch the grain. It's baked in communal ovens, and by the time you get your hands on it, it's already going stale. Yesterday's bread can be softened in water or ale. Last week's bread serves as a trencher, an edible plate that soaks up the juices. From whatever else you can afford, ale is safer than water, which should tell you everything you need to know about the water. Even children drink weak ale for breakfast, because the brewing process kills some of the nasties that lurk in Parisian water sources. The ale is thin, yeasty, and often sour, but it won't immediately kill you, which gives it a distinct advantage over the alternatives. If you're employed in a trade, you might have access to pottage, a thick soup made from whatever vegetables are available, usually onions, leeks, and cabbage, cooked in a pot that never fully empties. New ingredients are added to the pot as they become available, and the soup develops a complex flavor that's part nourishment, part mystery. Meat is a luxury reserved for feast days and the wealthy. The poor might taste bacon fat if they're fortunate, or a bit of blood sausage if someone has recently slaughtered a pig. Fresh meat spoils quickly without refrigeration, so most protein comes salted, smoked, or preserved in ways that turn it into something resembling leather. Street vendors hawk their wares from dawn till dusk. Pie sellers offer pasties filled with whatever meat they could afford, though you're often better off not asking what animal contributed to your meal. Apple sellers cry their wares, though the apples are often wrinkled, brown, and slightly fermented. The truly desperate might beg for scraps outside monasteries or noble houses, hoping for the leftovers from tables that actually see regular food. Children dart between market stalls, quick fingers snatching what they can before disappearing into the crowd, and yet, somehow, this meager fare sustains life. Your body learns to extract every possible calorie from whatever you can find. Hunger becomes a constant companion, a hollow ache that you learn to ignore because dwelling on it serves no purpose. This is how you break your fast in medieval Paris, where food is precious, hunger is normal, and every meal is a small victory against the grinding poverty that surrounds you. You step out into the street and immediately realize that walking in medieval Paris is less transportation and more extreme sport. The roads, if you can call them that, are narrow strips of mud, animal waste, and discarded refuse that have been trampled into a consistency somewhere between pudding and concrete. There are no sidewalks, just the edges of buildings where you can sometimes find drier footing. The street itself is shared by pedestrians, horses, carts, pigs, chickens, and the occasional escaped goat. Everyone moves with a peculiar shuffle, eyes constantly scanning the ground for holes, obstacles, and things you definitely don't want to step in. The streets follow no logical pattern. They twist and wind like a drunk man's path home, sometimes narrowing to barely shoulder width, sometimes opening into small squares where several equally confusing roads converge. Getting lost is easy. Finding your way home is an art form that takes years to master. Cartwheels splash through puddles that might be water, might be sewage, and might be something worse. Horses drop steaming piles wherever they please, and no one cleans them up. They just become part of the road surface, ground down by countless feet and wheels into the general muck. The buildings lean out over the streets, sometimes so far that people in upper stories can shake hands across the road. This blocks out most of the sunlight, creating a perpetual twilight at street level that makes it difficult to see where you're going. It also means that anything dropped from an upper window, and many things are dropped, can easily brain an unwary pedestrian. Watch out for the kennels, the open sewers running down the middle of many streets. They carry away the worst of the waste when they're flowing. When they're not, they become stagnant pools of disease that breed mosquitoes, rats, and probably demons. The noise is constant and overwhelming. Cartwheels rumble over stones. Vendors shout their wares. Animals grunt and squeal. Children scream. And somewhere, someone is always hammering something. The sound bounces off the narrow walls and multiplies until it becomes a roar that you feel in your bones. Traffic rules don't exist. Bigger vehicles have the right of way simply because they're bigger. Pedestrians dodge around carts. Carts dodge around each other. And everyone tries to avoid the occasional nobleman's horse, which will trample anyone in its path without a second Thought. Street signs are rare and often meaningless to the illiterate masses. Navigation depends on landmarks, the baker's shop with the crooked chimney, the house where the crazy woman throws fish heads, the alley where someone was murdered last winter. And yet, somehow, this chaos functions. People find their destinations, goods reach their markets, and life continues. You learn to read the rhythm of the streets, to anticipate the flow of traffic, and to move with the peculiar dance that keeps medieval Paris from complete gridlock. You've survived the night, choked down breakfast, and navigated the treacherous streets. Now comes the real challenge, finding work that pays enough to keep you alive until tomorrow. In medieval Paris, employment is a daily battle fought by thousands of desperate people for a handful of jobs that barely pay enough to buy bread. If you're lucky enough to have learned a trade, you might find work in one of the many guilds that control Parisian commerce. The guild system is designed to protect established craftsmen, which means it's designed to keep you out. Becoming an apprentice requires connections, money, and years of unpaid labor. Most people can't afford any of these things. For the desperate and unskilled, there's always manual labor. You might carry goods from the docks, haul stone for the endless construction projects, or dig ditches for a few deniers a day. The work is backbreaking, dangerous, and irregular. One day you might earn enough for dinner. The next you might earn nothing at all. Women face even fewer options. You might take in washing, though this means standing knee-deep in the filthy Seine, scrubbing clothes with lye that eats away at your hands. Or you might work as a servant in a wealthy household, which offers regular meals but also regular abuse from masters who consider you barely human. Street vending is always an option. If you can scrape together enough money to buy something to sell, old clothes, questionable food, trinkets made from scrap metal, anything might find a buyer among people as desperate as yourself. The competition is fierce, and the profit margins are razor thin. For those with strong stomachs and weak morals, there are always the darker trades. Body snatching for the medical schools, smuggling goods past the city guards, or working for the criminal gangs that operate in the shadows of Parisian society. These jobs pay better but come with the constant risk of hanging. The building trade offers occasional work, especially with the constant construction of Notre-Dame Cathedral. Hauling stones, mixing mortar, or simply carrying tools might earn you a day's wages. But construction work is seasonal, dangerous, and dominated by men with connections. Some turn to begging, though this is officially discouraged and often dangerous. The city guards don't look kindly on beggars, and neither do the established poor, who see new arrivals as competition for the same scraps. And then there are jobs that don't officially exist, but everyone knows about. Emptying chamber pots, cleaning up after executions, removing bodies from the river. These jobs pay because no one else wants to do them, which should tell you everything you need to know about working conditions. The key to survival is flexibility. You take whatever work you can find, wherever you can find it, for whatever pay is offered. Pride is a luxury that the poor can't afford. In medieval Paris, work isn't about career satisfaction or personal fulfillment. It's about having enough coins to buy bread for another day. In medieval Paris, Childhood isn't a time of innocence and play. It's a brief apprenticeship for the harsh realities of adult life, assuming you survive long enough to reach adulthood. Children are considered small adults, and they're expected to contribute to the family's survival from the moment they can walk. By age 5, you're already working. If your family is involved in a trade, you're learning to help with simple tasks. If they're not, you're learning to beg, steal, or scavenge for whatever might keep the family fed. Education is for the wealthy. Survival skills are for everyone else. Street children, orphaned by disease, war, or simple abandonment, roam Paris in packs. They know every hiding place, every loose brick, every window that might be left unlatched. They survive by their wits, their speed, and their willingness to do things that would horrify adults who still have consciences. Child labor isn't just common, it's essential. Children work in workshops, their small fingers perfect for detailed tasks that adult hands can't manage. They work in the fields outside the city, their backs bent over crops for hours at a time. They work as servants in wealthy households, invisible and expendable. The lucky ones might be apprenticed to a trade, though this often means years of unpaid labor in exchange for learning skills that might eventually earn them a living. The unlucky ones are sold to masters who work them until they break, then replace them with fresh children from the endless supply of urban poor. Disease stalks children with particular cruelty. Childhood diseases that modern medicine prevents or cures are death sentences in medieval Paris. Families routinely lose half their children before they reach adulthood. Names aren't given to infants until they've survived their first winter, because there's no point in getting attached to something that probably won't live. And yet, children adapt with remarkable resilience. They find joy in the smallest things: a discarded toy, a puddle to splash in, a moment of adult kindness. They create games from scraps and imagination. They form friendships that burn bright and brief in the harsh light of medieval reality. The concept of protecting children from harsh realities doesn't exist. Children witness violence, death, and brutality as part of daily life. They learn early that the world is cruel, that weakness is fatal, and that sentiment is a luxury they can't afford. But they also learn strength, cunning, and an appreciation for small pleasures that might escape more privileged children. They understand the value of food, shelter, and safety because they know how quickly these things can disappear. Childhood in medieval Paris ends abruptly, usually around age 12, when children are considered ready for adult responsibilities. There's no gradual transition, no extended adolescence. One day you're a child, the next you're expected to earn your keep or starve. Those who survive carry the scars of their childhood forever, but they also carry a strength that comes from knowing they've already survived the worst the world has to offer. Being a woman in medieval Paris means living with fewer options, more dangers, and constant reminders that society considers you a second-class citizen at best. Your life is shaped by forces beyond your control, and your survival depends on navigating a world designed by and for men. If you're unmarried, your choices are severely limited. You might work as a servant, which means long hours, low pay, and the constant threat of sexual abuse from masters who know you have no legal recourse. Domestic work is brutal: hauling water, washing clothes in the freezing Seine, cleaning fireplaces, and maintaining households that generate enormous amounts of dirt and waste. Marriage offers some protection, but comes with its own dangers. Childbirth is a leading cause of death among women, and you're expected to produce as many children as possible, regardless of your health or circumstances. Many women spend most of their adult lives either pregnant or recovering from childbirth. If you're married to a tradesman, you might work alongside your husband, learning skills that could support you if you become widowed. Widows often inherit their husband's trade and can achieve a level of independence impossible for unmarried women. But this independence comes at the cost of enormous responsibility and social isolation. Some women turn to brewing, one of the few trades dominated by women. Alewives are respected members of their communities, but the work is physically demanding and financially risky. Bad batches can ruin your reputation, and competition is fierce in a market where everyone needs your product. For the desperate, prostitution offers a way to survive, though it comes with enormous risks: disease, violence, and social ostracism. Make it a choice of last resort. The city authorities alternately tolerate and crack down on sex work, creating an unstable environment where women have no legal protections. Textile work offers another option. Women spin thread, weave cloth, and create the fabrics that clothe medieval Paris. It's skilled work that can be done at home, making it compatible with child-rearing responsibilities. But the pay is low, and the work is hard on your eyes and hands. Women also work in the markets, selling everything from vegetables to second-hand clothes. Market women are known for their sharp tongues and sharper business sense, but they operate in a cash economy where a bad day can mean going hungry. The legal system offers women little protection. A woman's testimony is worth less than a man's in court. Rape is technically illegal, but difficult to prove and often blamed on the victim. Domestic violence is considered a private matter between husband and wife. And yet, women find ways to exercise power and influence. They form networks of mutual support, sharing resources and information. They pass down knowledge through generations, teaching daughters how to survive in a hostile world. They find strength in each other that the official power structures try to deny them. Religion offers some women an alternative to marriage and motherhood. Nuns and beguines can achieve education, independence, and respect within religious communities. But even these opportunities are limited and require connections or dowries that most families can't provide. In medieval Paris, being a woman means being resilient, resourceful, and constantly aware of the dangers that surround you. It means finding dignity and purpose in a world that questions your right to exist independently. And somehow, women not only survive, but create the networks of care and support that hold communities together. In medieval Paris, disease isn't an occasional visitor. It's a permanent resident that moves through the population like a slow, relentless tide. Death is so common that it becomes part of the background noise of daily life, like the rumble of cartwheels or the crying of street vendors. The plague is the most feared visitor, arriving periodically to decimate the population. When it strikes, entire neighborhoods empty out as people flee or die. Bodies pile up in the streets faster than they can be collected. The living avoid the dead, and the healthy avoid the sick. though in the cramped conditions of medieval Paris, avoidance is often impossible. But plague is just the most dramatic killer. Everyday diseases claim far more lives in the long run. Tuberculosis eats away at lungs already damaged by polluted air. Dysentery strikes down those who drink contaminated water or eat spoiled food. Fever carries off the young and old with ruthless efficiency. Childbirth is particularly dangerous. Women die in labor, babies die within days of birth, and mothers die from infections that modern antibiotics could cure in days. Families learn not to name children until they've survived their first winter, and even then, childhood diseases wait to claim those who make it past infancy. Medical care exists, but it's based more on superstition than science. Physicians, when you can find and afford them, still believe in balancing the four humors through bloodletting, purging, and other treatments that often do more harm than good. Barbosurgeons offer crude operations without anesthesia or understanding of infection. Most people rely on folk remedies passed down through generations. Herbs, prayers, and rituals that might help, might do nothing, or might make things worse. When someone falls ill, the family gathers to watch and wait, knowing that recovery depends more on luck than treatment. The bodies of the dead pose their own problems. In summer, they decompose quickly, spreading disease and attracting vermin. In winter, they freeze, creating a backlog that overwhelms the city's limited burial facilities. Mass graves are common, especially during plague years when individual burials become impossible. Funeral rites are simple affairs for the poor. Bodies are wrapped in whatever cloth can be spared and buried in churchyards that are constantly being expanded to accommodate the steady stream of corpses. The wealthy can afford elaborate ceremonies, but they die from the same diseases as everyone else. Mental illness is poorly understood and often attributed to demonic possession or divine punishment. Those afflicted might be cared for by family, left to wander the streets, or locked away in conditions that make their suffering worse. Accidents add to the death toll. Falls from buildings, crushing by carts, kicks from horses, and burns from open fires claim lives regularly. With no emergency medical services, injuries that might be treatable today become death sentences in medieval Paris. And yet, life continues. People marry, have children, and build what happiness they can in the shadow of constant mortality. They develop a fatalistic acceptance of death that allows them to function despite the ever-present threat. Prayers are offered, but expectations are low. In medieval Paris, death isn't the end of life's story. It's a character that appears in every chapter, sometimes in the background, sometimes taking center stage, but always present, always waiting. The relationship between medieval Paris and water is complicated, toxic, and potentially lethal. The Seine River, which should be the city's lifeline, has become its sewer, its garbage dump, and its industrial waste facility, all rolled into one brown, stinking waterway that somehow still serves as the primary source of drinking water. The river accepts everything the city has to offer. Human waste flows directly into it through open sewers and private latrines built over the water. Dead animals, kitchen scraps, and industrial runoff from tanners, dyers, and metalworkers all find their way into the Seine. The the water downstream from Paris, is essentially a slow-moving soup of everything the city wants to get rid of. And yet, people drink this water because they have no choice. Wells are rare and often contaminated by the same sources that pollute the river. Spring water is a luxury available only to the wealthy. For everyone else, it's sane water or nothing, and nothing isn't really an option. Some try to make the water safer by boiling it, but fuel is expensive and time is limited. Others let it sit in containers, hoping that the worst particles will settle to the bottom. Most people simply drink it and hope for the best, knowing that the alternative is immediate death from thirst rather than eventual death from disease. Ale and wine are safer alternatives because the brewing and fermentation processes kill some of the harmful organisms. Even children drink weak ale with their meals, not for pleasure, but for survival. This creates a population that's mildly intoxicated most of the time, which might actually help them cope with the harsh realities of medieval life. Bathing is rare, partly because of the water quality, and partly because of the belief that water opens pores and allows disease to enter the body. Most people wash their hands and faces occasionally, but full-body bathing might happen a few times a year, if at all. Waste disposal is a constant challenge. Human waste accumulates in chamber pots that must be emptied regularly. The contents are supposed to be taken to designated areas outside the city, but in practice, they're often dumped in the nearest convenient location, alleys, empty lots, or directly into the river. The famous cry of Garda's Low, "Watch out for water," warns pedestrians that someone is about to empty a chamber pot from an upper window. This is such a common occurrence that people develop a sixth sense for when to duck or dodge. Public latrines exist, but are few, filthy, and dangerous. They're built over flowing water when possible, which carries away the waste but also contributes to the pollution of the city's water supply. The cycle is self-perpetuating and seemingly unstoppable. Street cleaning doesn't exist as an organized service. Rain washes away some of the accumulated filth, but it also creates flooding that spreads contamination into areas that were previously relatively clean. Dry weather allows waste to accumulate and concentrate, creating health hazards that increase with each passing day. Animals contribute their own waste to the general mess. Horses, pigs, chickens, and goats all live in close proximity to humans, and their droppings mix with human waste to create a rich, toxic environment that breeds disease and attracts vermin. In this environment, water becomes both necessity and enemy. You need it to survive, but every drink is a gamble with death. The people of medieval Paris develop strong constitutions through constant exposure to contamination, but they also die young from diseases that clean water could prevent. Medieval Paris operates under a simple principle: might makes right, and the law serves whoever has the most power. Justice isn't blind, it's corrupt, arbitrary, and heavily influenced by social class, personal connections, and the ability to pay bribes. Crime is everywhere because poverty is everywhere. Pickpockets work the crowded markets, cutting purse strings with razors sharp enough to slice through leather. Burglars climb through windows left open for ventilation, taking whatever isn't nailed down, and sometimes taking the nails too. Street robbery is common, especially after dark, when the narrow alleys become hunting grounds for desperate men with knives. Travelers are particular targets, since they're unfamiliar with the city's dangerous areas and often carry more money than locals. Murder happens regularly, sometimes for money, sometimes for honor, and sometimes just because someone looked at someone else the wrong way. Bodies turn up in the Seine, in abandoned buildings, and in dark corners where no one asks questions. The city watch exists, but they're understaffed, underpaid, and often corrupt. They focus on protecting the wealthy neighborhoods, leaving the poor to fend for themselves. When they do make arrests, it's often the wrong person or someone who couldn't afford to buy their way out of trouble. Trials are brief affairs that rarely involve actual investigation. Guilt is often determined by social standing rather than evidence. A nobleman's word carries more weight than a dozen witnesses from the merchant class, and the testimony of the poor counts for almost nothing. Punishment is public, brutal, and designed to entertain as much as deter. Public hangings draw crowds like festivals, with vendors selling food and drink to spectators who cheer for the condemned. Beheadings are reserved for the nobility, since it's considered a more honorable death than hanging for lesser crimes. Punishment might involve the pillory, where criminals are locked in wooden restraints while citizens throw rotten food, stones, or worse. The stocks serve a similar purpose, holding criminals in uncomfortable positions while the public abuses them. Mutilation is common for repeat offenders. Thieves lose fingers or hands, while those guilty of bearing false witness might lose their tongues. These punishments mark criminals for life, making it almost impossible for them to reintegrate into society. Prisons are rare and mainly used to hold people awaiting trial rather than as punishment themselves. Most criminals are dealt with immediately, punished, executed, or released if they can prove their innocence or pay sufficient bribes. The Church offers sanctuary to those who can reach it, but this protection is limited and often temporary. Eventually, criminals must face secular justice or spend their lives confined to church grounds. Some crimes are handled by guild justice when they involve trade disputes or violations of craft regulations. Guild courts are often more fair than royal courts, but they're also more concerned with protecting guild interests than seeking abstract justice. Vigilante justice fills the gaps left by official law enforcement. Neighborhoods sometimes band together to deal with persistent criminals, especially when the authorities are unwilling or unable to act. This rough justice is swift, but not always accurate. For the wealthy and connected, crime rarely results in serious consequences. Fines can be paid, witnesses can be bought, and judges can be influenced. For the poor, even minor inferences can result in death or permanent disfigurement. In medieval Paris, the law is less a system of justice than a tool of social control, designed to keep the poor in line while protecting the interests of those with power and money. When illness strikes in medieval Paris, your first decision isn't which doctor to see, it's whether you can afford to see anyone at all. Medical care exists, but it's expensive, often ineffective, and sometimes more dangerous than the disease itself. Physicians are the elite of medieval medicine, university-trained men who diagnose by examining urine, checking pulses, and consulting astrological charts. They rarely touch patients directly, considering manual examination beneath their dignity. Their treatments are based on the theory of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, which must be kept in balance for health. Bloodletting is the cure for almost everything. Too much blood causes fever, so blood must be removed. Too little blood causes weakness, so more blood must be removed to restore balance. Leeches, sharp knives, and heated cups create wounds that drain the patient's strength along with their blood. Barber surgeons handle the messy, hands-on medical work that physicians won't touch. They cut hair, extract teeth, set bones, and perform surgery without anesthesia or understanding of infection. Their shops are identified by the red and white, striped poles that represent bloody bandages wrapped around a staff. Surgery is brutal and usually fatal. Patients are held down by assistants, while the barber surgeon works with crude instruments in unsanitary conditions. Those who survive the operation often die from infection within days. Amputation is common for broken bones that won't heal properly. Midwives attend births using knowledge passed down through generations of women. They're often more effective than university-trained physicians because they focus on practical care rather than theoretical humors. But childbirth remains extremely dangerous, claiming the lives of mothers and babies with horrifying regularity. Pharmacies sell a bewildering array of substances, many of which are useless or harmful. Powdered unicorn horn, ground pearls, and exotic herbs promise miraculous cures for those who can afford them. For the poor, there's always laudanum, a mixture of wine and opium that doesn't cure anything but makes patients stop complaining. Folk medicine thrives among those who can't afford formal medical care. Herbal remedies, prayer, and ritual healing are passed down through families and communities. Some of these treatments are surprisingly effective, while others are completely useless. The problem is that no one knows which is which. Hospitals exist, but they're run by religious orders and focus more on spiritual care than medical treatment. They provide shelter for the sick and dying, but recovery rates are no better than staying home. Most people view hospitals as places to go to die with dignity rather than places to get well. Mental illness is poorly understood and often attributed to demonic possession or divine punishment. Treatment might involve exorcism, prayer, or simply confining the afflicted until they recover or die. Some families care for mentally ill relatives at home, while others abandon them to wander the streets. Dental care consists mainly of extraction. Toothaches are treated by pulling the offending tooth with crude instruments and no pain relief. Most people lose most of their teeth by middle age, making eating difficult and contributing to malnutrition, plague, and epidemic diseases. Overwhelm whatever medical resources exist. During outbreaks, physicians flee the city, leaving the poor to die without any care at all. Bodies pile up faster than they can be buried, and entire neighborhoods are abandoned. For most people in medieval Paris, staying healthy means avoiding doctors and relying on strong constitutions, folk wisdom, and divine intervention. Medical care is something you seek when you've given up hope, not when you expect to get better. Fire is the ultimate terror in medieval Paris, a monster that can devour entire neighborhoods in hours and leave thousands homeless, injured, or dead. In a city built largely of wood, thatch, and hope, flame is always just a spark away from catastrophe. At every building is a potential tinderbox. Wooden frames support walls of wattle and daub. Roofs are thatched with straw, and floors are covered with rushes that haven't been changed in months. Open flames provide light and heat through candles, oil lamps, and hearth fires that burn constantly throughout the cold months. Kitchen fires are the most common starting point for disasters. Cooking over open flames with hanging pots, grease, and tired, overworked people creates countless opportunities for accidents. A dropped torch, an overturned pot, or a spark from the hearth can ignite a room in seconds. Workshop fires spread even faster. Smiths work with forges that throw sparks. Tanners use processes involving heat and flammable chemicals. And bakers operate ovens that reach temperatures hot enough to ignite nearby buildings. When these workshops catch fire, they burn with an intensity that makes firefighting nearly impossible. The city's layout makes fires worse. Buildings lean against each other, sharing walls and sometimes roofs. Streets are so narrow that flames can jump from one side to the other, and the overhanging upper stories create wind tunnels that feed fires with oxygen, while blocking access for anyone trying to fight them. There's no organized fire department. When fire breaks out, neighbors grab leather buckets and form human chains to pass water from the nearest well or the Seine. This works for small fires caught early, but larger blazes quickly overwhelm these amateur efforts. Most people focus on saving what they can carry, rather than fighting flames they can't control. Water is always in short supply. Wells are few and often dry during summer months. The Seine is distant from many neighborhoods, and carrying water up steep hills through narrow streets takes time that burning buildings don't allow. By the time enough water arrives, fires have usually grown beyond any possibility of control. Fire watches patrol some wealthy neighborhoods, but they're limited and focused on protecting valuable properties rather than the crowded slums where most people live. These watchmen carry horns to sound alarms, but their main job is to wake people so they can flee, not to fight fires. When fires do start, panic spreads faster than flames. People rush to save their few possessions, blocking narrow streets with furniture, animals, and their own bodies. Escape routes become death traps as crowds push and trample each other in their desperation to reach safety. Buildings collapse without warning as fire weakens wooden supports. People who stay too long trying to save belongings are crushed by falling beams or trapped by collapsed roofs. The lucky ones die quickly from smoke inhalation before the flames reach them after fires pass. The damage extends far beyond burned buildings. Entire families find themselves homeless with no resources to rebuild. Craftsmen lose their tools, merchants lose their goods, and everyone loses the community networks that helped them survive in normal times. Some fires are deliberately set. Arsonists might target the homes of enemies, rivals, or simply random victims. During times of social unrest, fires become weapons used to settle scores or create chaos that provides cover for looting. Fire prevention barely exists. Some people keep sand or dirt near their hearths to smother small fires, but most rely on prayers and luck. The wealthy might invest in stone construction or tile roofs. But even these precautions can't stop fires that start in neighboring wooden buildings. Insurance doesn't exist. When fire destroys your home, workshop, or business, you start over. With nothing, or you don't start over at all. Many fire victims end up begging on the streets, or leaving the city entirely to seek opportunities elsewhere. The smell of smoke hangs over Paris constantly, a reminder that somewhere, something is always burning. People learn to distinguish between the normal smoke of cooking fires and the acrid smell of building fires that signal immediate danger in medieval Paris. Fire isn't just a hazard. It's a fact of life that shapes how people build, where they live, and how quickly they can run when the flames come calling. In medieval Paris, religion isn't just what you do on Sundays. It's the framework that holds your entire world together. From the moment you wake to the time you sleep, the church bells mark the rhythm of your day, and divine will explains everything from good harvests to plague outbreaks. The Cathedral of Notre-Dame dominates the city's skyline and its spiritual life, though it's still under construction and will be for decades to come. Workers swarm over its growing walls like ants, hauling stone and timber to create what will become one of Christianity's greatest monuments. Even unfinished, it's already the heart of Parisian religious life. Church bells ring throughout the day, calling people to prayer at matins, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. For most people, these bells are the only clocks they have, dividing the day into manageable segments and reminding everyone of their spiritual obligations. Sunday Mass is mandatory, not just spiritually, but legally. Failure to attend can result in fines, public humiliation, or worse. The service is conducted in Latin, which most people don't understand. But understanding isn't the point. Participation in the ritual connects you to the community and demonstrates your submission to divine authority. Saints play enormous roles in daily life. Every trade has a patron saint, every neighborhood has a favored protector, and every individual hopes for intercession from heavenly advocates. Saint Eloi watches over metalworkers, Saint Martha protects servants, and Saint Christopher guards travelers. People pray to different saints for different needs, creating a complex spiritual economy of divine favors. Religious festivals punctuate the year, providing breaks from work and opportunities for celebration. Easter, Christmas, Pentecost, and dozens of saints' days create a calendar of feasts that give meaning to the endless cycle of labor and survival. These festivals often blend Christian observance with older pagan traditions, creating celebrations that serve multiple spiritual needs. The church owns enormous amounts of property in Paris, from grand monasteries to humble parish buildings. Monks and nuns provide what little education, medical care, and charity exist in the city. Monasteries often serve as banks, lending money and storing valuables for those who can afford their services. Confession is regular and required. People confess their sins to priests who assign penances, ranging from prayers to pilgrimages. This system provides social control as well as spiritual guidance, since priests learn everyone's secrets and can influence behavior through the threat of public exposure or divine punishment. Religious art fills the churches, telling biblical stories to an illiterate population through paintings, sculptures, and stained glass windows. These images aren't just decoration, they're textbooks, teaching religious concepts and moral lessons to people who can't read written texts. Pilgrimage is both spiritual obligation and practical opportunity. People travel to holy sites, seeking cures for illnesses, forgiveness for sins, or simply adventure beyond their daily routines. Pilgrims receive special protections under church law, making pilgrimage one of the few ways for common people to travel safely. Religious relics hold enormous power. Pieces of saints' bones, fragments of the true cross, or cloths that touched holy figures are believed to perform miracles. Churches compete to acquire relics that will attract pilgrims and their money, creating a thriving trade in body parts and religious artifacts. Heresy is the ultimate crime, worse than murder or treason, because it threatens not just earthly order, but eternal salvation. Suspected heretics face investigation, torture, and execution, with their property confiscated by church authorities. The fear of heresy accusations keeps most people firmly within orthodox beliefs. Death and religion are intimately connected. Last rites prepare souls for eternity. Funeral masses ease the journey to heaven, and prayers for the dead continue long after burial. The Church's teachings about afterlife provide comfort for those facing medieval mortality rates, promising eternal reward for earthly suffering. Superstition and official religion blend seamlessly. People wear religious medals as protection against disease, use holy water to bless crops, and interpret natural events as divine messages. The Church tolerates these practices as long as they support, rather than challenge, official doctrine. For most people in medieval Paris, religion provides the only explanation for why life is so hard, the only hope that things might get better, and the only community that offers support in times of crisis. Faith isn't just belief, it's survival strategy. When darkness falls over medieval Paris, the city transforms into something altogether more dangerous and unpredictable. Without streetlights, without police patrols, and with most honest citizens safely behind barred doors, the night belongs to a different class of people entirely. The sunset curfew isn't just a suggestion, it's enforced by law. Church bells ring to signal the end of the working day, and anyone found on the streets after dark without good reason risks arrest, robbery, or worse. The City Watch makes occasional patrols, but they stick to well-traveled routes and avoid the maze of back alleys where most trouble occurs. Darkness is absolute in ways that modern people can barely imagine. There are no street lamps, no neon signs, no light pollution from windows. The moon and stars provide what illumination exists, and on cloudy nights, the city becomes a black void where you can't see your hand in front of your face. Those who must venture out carry lanterns or torches, but these create as many problems as they solve. Light marks you as a target for robbers who prefer victims they can see clearly. It also reveals your location to anyone who might wish you harm, while blinding you to dangers lurking just beyond the flame's reach. Taverns stay open later than most establishments, serving weak ale and watery wine to customers who can't or won't go home. These gathering places become islands of light and warmth in the dark city, but they also attract gambling, fighting, and criminal planning. Tavern brawls are common, and they often spill into the streets, where they can turn deadly. Night soil men begin their work after dark, emptying chamber pots and cleaning out latrines under cover of darkness. They work by touch and smell, navigating the city's waste management system through pure familiarity. Their work is essential, but disgusting, and they're often the only honest workers on the streets after curfew. Prostitutes emerge from their daytime hiding places to work the streets, alleys, and taverns. They face constant dangers from violent customers, corrupt watchmen, and rival sex workers competing for the same clientele. Many work under the protection of criminal gangs, trading safety for a portion of their earnings. Thieves and cutthroats use the darkness to their advantage, setting up ambushes in narrow alleys and dead-end streets. They know every hiding place, every escape route, and every building where they can fence stolen goods. The wise traveler avoids certain neighborhoods entirely after dark. But sometimes, geography and necessity force dangerous choices. Fires become more dangerous at night because they're harder to spot until they've grown beyond control. Families sleep heavily after long days of physical labor, and by the time smoke wakes them, flames may have already blocked their escape routes. Night fires often claim entire families who never had a chance to flee. Strange sounds echo through the darkness, footsteps that stop when you stop. Whispered conversations in unknown languages, the splash of something heavy hitting the Seine. Most people learn to ignore these sounds because investigating often leads to trouble, and ignorance can be a form of protection. Animals behave differently at night. Horses spook at shadows, dogs bark at phantom threats, and rats grow bold enough to venture into inhabited areas. Even familiar streets become alien landscapes where ordinary landmarks disappear into blackness. Some people work night shifts by necessity, bakers starting pre-dawn preparation, midwives responding to labor calls, and guards watching over valuable properties. These night workers develop a different relationship with the city, learning its nocturnal rhythms and dangers. Religious services continue through the night in some monasteries, where monks rise for midnight prayers, regardless of weather or season. Their chanting provides an eerie soundtrack to the sleeping city, a reminder that spiritual life continues even when earthly concerns rest. For most people, night means huddling behind locked doors, trying to sleep despite the cold, the noise, and the knowledge that tomorrow will bring another day of struggle. Sleep itself becomes a luxury, interrupted by crying children, snoring relatives, and the constant sounds of a city that never quite falls silent. The night reveals medieval Paris in its rawest form, a place where civilization's thin veneer peels away to expose the brutal realities beneath. The markets of medieval Paris are sensory assaults that combine the best and worst of urban commerce. From dawn until dusk, the city's squares and streets transform into chaotic bazaars where anything imaginable can be bought, sold, traded, or stolen, assuming you can navigate the crowds, avoid the pickpockets, and survive the experience. The smell hits you first, a complex bouquet of fresh bread, rotting vegetables, unwashed bodies, animal dung, and something indefinably wrong that seems to rise from the very ground. Vendors cry their wares in voices that can be heard 3 streets away, creating a constant din that makes conversation nearly impossible. Food stalls dominate the markets, selling everything from questionable meat pies to slightly less questionable vegetables. Bread vendors offer loaves of varying quality and honesty. Some bakers are known for adding sawdust or chalk to stretch their flour, while others pride themselves on honest ingredients that justify higher prices. Fish sellers work near the Seine, offering whatever the river and surrounding countryside can provide. Fresh fish is expensive and spoils quickly in the pre-refrigeration era. Salted, smoked, or pickled fish lasts longer but tastes like it's been preserved in seawater and regret. Meat vendors attract clouds of flies and suspicious customers who've learned to inspect their purchases carefully. Beef, pork, and mutton are available when animals can be slaughtered, but the meat often comes from old, sick, or injured animals that no one else wanted. Chicken and eggs are safer bets, though even these can be problematic. Cloth merchants display fabrics ranging from rough wool to imported silk, though most customers can only afford the coarsest materials. Used clothing vendors offer garments with unknown histories. Some might have come from plague victims, while others are simply worn out from years of hard use. Tool and weapon sellers cater to craftsmen and those who need to protect themselves. Quality varies enormously, from masterwork pieces created by guild artisans to crude implements that might break after a few uses. Buying tools is always a gamble, but working without them isn't an option. Money changers operate from semi-permanent stalls, exchanging coins from different regions and kingdoms while charging fees that would make modern banks blush. They also serve as informal banks, holding deposits and making loans at interest rates that reflect the enormous risks of medieval commerce. Pickpockets work the crowds with professional skill, targeting distracted shoppers and visitors unfamiliar with local hazards. They operate in teams, with children serving as lookouts and adults handling the actual theft. Getting robbed in the market is so common that experienced shoppers learn to carry decoy purses filled with worthless coins. Beggars position themselves strategically throughout the markets, appealing to religious guilt and human sympathy. Some are genuinely destitute, while others are part of organized criminal enterprises. Distinguishing between legitimate need and professional fraud requires local knowledge that visitors often lack. Market regulations exist, but are haphazardly enforced. Guild inspectors check for quality and proper weights, while city officials collect taxes and fees. Corruption is common, with vendors paying bribes to avoid scrutiny or punishment for selling. Substandard goods, seasonal variations, dramatically affect what's available and how much it costs. Fresh fruits and vegetables appear briefly during harvest seasons, while preserved foods dominate the winter months. Prices fluctuate wildly based on weather, warfare, and the basic unpredictability of medieval supply chains. Credit and barter supplement cash transactions. Regular customers develop relationships with preferred vendors, buying on promises to pay later or trading goods for services. These personal connections often matter more than money in a world where trust is rare and valuable. Violence occasionally erupts when disputes over prices, quality, or territorial rights boil over into open conflict. Market fights can involve anything from fists to knives, and they often escalate to include friends, family, and random bystanders. who get caught up in the chaos, despite all the dangers and inconveniences. The markets remain the economic heart of medieval Paris. There, where the city feeds itself, clothes itself, and conducts the daily business that keeps urban life functioning. Love them or hate them, you can't avoid them, not if you want to eat, dress, or survive in the greatest city of medieval Europe. Medieval Paris doesn't just change with the seasons, it's transformed by them, cycling through periods of relative abundance and absolute misery that test the survival skills of everyone who calls the city home. Each season brings its own challenges, opportunities, and ways to die. Spring arrives with mixed blessings. The frozen waste of winter begins to thaw, releasing months of accumulated filth in an aromatic flood that makes the already polluted Seine even more toxic. Melting snow and spring rains turn the unpaved streets into rivers of mud mixed with sewage, animal waste, and decomposing organic matter that defies description. But spring also means fresh food. Early vegetables appear in the markets, providing vitamins that have been absent from winter diets. People emerge from their winter hibernation pale, thin, and eager for sunlight that might help heal bodies damaged by months of poor nutrition and limited activity. Summer brings its own problems. The heat concentrates the city's smells into a suffocating miasma that makes breathing an act of willpower. The Seine slows to a trickle that concentrates pollution while reducing the water. Flies multiply exponentially, spreading disease from waste piles to food supplies with enthusiastic efficiency. Food spoils quickly in the summer heat. Meat must be eaten immediately or preserved with salt that most people can't afford. Milk sours within hours, and even vegetables rot faster than they can be consumed. The wealthy can afford ice houses and cold storage, but the poor learn to eat fast or go hungry. Autumn is the best season for those who survive long enough to see it. Harvest time brings fresh grain, fruits, and vegetables that provide the last good meals before winter. People work frantically to preserve whatever they can, salting meat, drying vegetables, and storing grain against the lean months ahead. But autumn also brings the first hints of the cold that will dominate the next half year. People begin the annual scramble for fuel, warm clothing, and secure shelter that might keep them alive until spring. Those who can't afford adequate preparation face the grim prospect of freezing or starving before the year ends. Winter is the killer season. Fuel becomes scarce and expensive, forcing people to choose between staying warm and eating regularly. Many can't afford both, leading to a steady stream of deaths from cold, malnutrition, and diseases that thrive in weakened bodies. Frozen pipes and wells cut off water supplies, forcing people to melt snow or ice for drinking water. The Seine sometimes freezes solid, stopping the flow of trade goods and fresh water that the city depends on. Food stores dwindle as preserved supplies run out and fresh food becomes impossible to obtain. Houses become death traps as people burn anything combustible to stay warm. Furniture, books, and even parts of buildings disappear into fireplaces as fuel supplies run out. Families huddle together for warmth, sharing body heat and hoping their combined breath will create enough warmth to survive another night. Clothing becomes a matter of life and death. Multiple layers of wool, fur, and anything else that might trap heat become essential for survival. The poor wrap themselves in rags, blankets, and whatever scraps they can find, creating bundle-like figures that shuffle through the streets, looking more like animated refuse piles than human beings. Social services don't exist to help people survive seasonal crises. Churches provide some charity, but their resources are limited and often reserved for the most desperate cases. Neighbors might share resources, but everyone is struggling, and generosity becomes a luxury that few can afford. Death rates spike during the worst months, especially among the very young and very old. Bodies accumulate faster than they can be buried in frozen ground, creating health hazards that persist until spring thaw allows for proper disposal. Seasonal work patterns mean that many people have no income during the worst months. Construction stops, agriculture hibernates, and trade slows to a trickle. Families that barely survive during good months face starvation during the lean seasons. For those who do survive winter, spring's arrival feels like resurrection. The first warm day, the first green shoots, the first fresh food, these become celebrations of life itself. Reminders that survival is possible and that another year of struggle lies ahead. In medieval Paris, the seasons don't just mark time. They determine who lives and who dies, testing the strength, resourcefulness, and luck of everyone who dares to call this harsh city home. So, after 15 chapters of disease, filth, poverty, and the constant threat of death, ask yourself, honestly, would you survive medieval Paris? Probably not. Let's be clear about what this city demanded of its residents. This wasn't a place built for comfort or convenience. It was a brutal testing ground where only the strongest, smartest, and luckiest managed to reach old age, which, in medieval terms, meant living past 30. Every day was a battle against hunger, disease, violence, and the simple hostility of an urban environment that seemed designed to kill its inhabitants. You'd miss things we take for granted: clean water that doesn't require boiling, food that won't poison you, medical care that helps more than it hurts. You'd wonder why everyone smells terrible, why children die so regularly, and why people accept conditions that would horrify modern health inspectors. And yet, people not only survived but thrived in medieval Paris. They built Notre-Dame Cathedral, created complex trade networks, developed systems of governance, and laid the foundations for what would become modern Europe. They fell in love, raised families, created art, and found joy in circumstances that would break most modern people. They weren't superhuman. They were simply people who had no choice but to endure what couldn't be changed and fight to improve what could be changed. They formed communities of mutual support, developed institutions that provided some measure of stability, and created meaning in lives that were often brutally short. They laughed at jokes we'd find crude, found comfort in rituals we'd consider superstitious, and took pride in accomplishments we'd consider routine. They made the best of circumstances we'd consider impossible, not because they were stronger than us, but because they had to. The people of medieval Paris carried the weight of history on their shoulders, often literally, in the form of stones for cathedral construction or goods for international trade. They built the world we inherited, often with their bare hands, and always with their sweat, tears, and blood. Maybe it's okay that we wouldn't survive their world. It means we've built something better. But perhaps we should remember them not as statistics in history books, but as individuals who faced impossible challenges with remarkable courage, creating beauty and meaning in a world that offered precious little of either. Medieval Paris was a hard place that created hard people, but those hard people created wonders that still inspire us today. Cathedrals that reach toward heaven, stories that still move us, and institutions that still serve us. They proved that humans can endure almost anything and still find reasons to hope. In the narrow, filthy streets of medieval Paris, surrounded by disease and death, people still sang songs, told stories, and believed in tomorrow. That might be the most remarkable survival skill of all.